Well, good morning, everyone. So, we just get inside this week's topic, which is regulation for privacy. Um, yeah, I think I'll share my screen from here. Yeah, so I think today I will just have a small overview of what happened in the last week, and then we'll quickly move on to the questions. Um, so the lecture kind of started with a very unique mention of a very famous song, Hotel California. So it just says once you get in, you can't get out, right? So it was a good way to talk about the paradigm of entering some contract and then you can't leave the contract exactly, right? And then I think what is most important here is this related words, which is anonymity. So anonymity is the ability to conceal a person's identity. Individuals can choose to be totally anonymous, pseudo-anonymous, or identifiable. So it's pretty much what it is. And secrecy is also another term which has been defined as the intentional concealment of information. Privacy need not hide, and secrecy hides far more than what is private. And then you have confidentiality. So this confidentiality is spoken about in tandem with privacy, right? So confidentiality is something that happens when it comes to a huge organization. The same thing on a smaller level, on a personal scale, is called privacy. So that's the point that was made during the lecture. You can go back and watch the videos. Right? Concerns the externalization of restricted but accurate information to a specific entity. British law embraces privacy as confidentiality. Right? So security is a protection of personal information with three specific roles: integrity, authentication, and confidentiality. So basically, we got the CIA, right? So this is a 4x4 summarization of what each of these terms mean. Um, although there is a small ambiguity here. Uh, it's just that when the accuracy of personal information is high and the amount of personal information externalized is high. So this is the amount of information that went out of an organization that has to go out of the organization. And the accuracy of personal information is when you don't modify the personal information, when you're completely transparent about it. Now we'll talk about how data
What is
is.
externalization? What is externalization?
Oh, externalization is, see, there's an organization, it has data. That data is always kept inside. But what if the data has to be put outside? In the sense, what if it has to be published on their website? That is called data externalization. That is one meaning for data externalization. The second is when data has to be shared across multiple organizations. So I have data, but I cannot process it. I don't have the means to process it. I don't have the AI capabilities to process it. So I give it to, let's say, ChatGPT or someone else. So that means I am externalizing that data to somebody else, to some other organization. So there are these two meanings for that. So essentially, when it goes out of your hand, right? So that's what externalization is. So when it is externalized, as well as the data is not modified, it is as it is. Then you then transparency kicks in, where you are very transparent with what you're sending outside, right? Does that answer your question? I think it should. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that is data externalization. Um, so if you move slightly towards the left, you have data is externalized, but you are reducing the accuracy of personal information, meaning you are modifying the data. And later on the slides, we'll know how data is modified in order to maintain its processability, but in order to protect the people who are encoded in that data. And then if you move a little bit down here, confidentiality, uh, you don't modify or mess with the data, but you don't externalize that data that easily. Right? So which means nobody else will know. So it's very guarded secret. And complete secrecy is when uh, you don't share anything at all, and you also completely anonymize the data, and then you keep it to yourself. So this is just another representation of what was being told here, but with the context of organizations and how they store data and how they process data. Right? This might be slightly non-intuitive, but yeah, I think that's what this talks about. So anonymity is the ability to conceal a person's identity, and it is central for the information collected for statistical purposes and use of IT. Right. So I think there was this point put forward in the class which spoke about the browser and private browsing. The question was how does private browsing actually anonymize things for you? So the answer was yes and no. So it does at the local level, it does, but at a slightly network level, it does not. In the sense that your computer won't log anything, but because all the data packets are all going through the network, through the internet. So your ISP, your internet service provider, who's at the edge of your network, he'll be able to look at your packets. At least he'll know which are the sites you're accessing, which IP addresses you're accessing. He might not be able to figure out what it is that you're doing inside that site. He might not be able to do that because it's encrypted, right? But um, but yeah, so there is some level of privacy. It's not like the ISP can exactly see what is your username that you're entering, what is the password you're entering, all of that. So all that is encrypted, and it's all done using the RSA, or rather the public key crypto system that we just saw. So it does not, just because the ISP is in between you and the server does not mean he can decode all the messages. So that's not possible. What he can look at is the IP address of all the packets that are going out, and he'll know, okay, you're accessing these sites and these times. Okay, but that itself is a big amount of information, right? So he'll know, he can basically sell that data, try marketing and all that stuff. So here comes a very sensitive part of today's world. So when it comes to research, as I think you might all be knowing, data sets, right? So what are these data sets? So these data sets are those that we get after data mining. Essentially, if the company is a health company, then that company is going to have a database of users, and these databases contain the information of the users, what are the conditions and all of that. So what happens is you tend to mine this data from either companies or from their websites. You can scrape these data and you can make data sets out of it, right? But the problem is when you get these data sets or this data asset is, then you also have to ensure that the data does not leak any personal information of some particular individual, because if it does, then it's a breach of their individuality and their privacy. So again, we're coming back to this anonymity. Anonymity exists. So where was anonymity last time? It was in the top right corner. So anonymity was over here. Anonymity was over on the left side. It was over here. So basically, what it says is we are going to modify or rather reduce the accuracy of data, but we'll put out the data, right? So the goal of privacy preserving data mining is to develop data mining protocols without increasing the risk of misuse of data. So increasing the risk of misuse of data is like if you even if you put the data out, nobody can infer anything from that data about a particular individual without breaching someone's privacy. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so there are some techniques here. So first is randomization. Um, so when it comes to randomization, so I think you got the context of what it is we're trying to do here. We're trying to collect data sets, but without affecting or crossing over someone's personal rights, right? Their privacy. So randomization, what it does is there are three methods. One is randomization, and then anonymization, and then encryption. So randomization is nothing but you have the original data set, which is a data set is nothing but a flat table of data. That's all. There are some columns, and then you have data. That's what it is. There's nothing fancy here. And you have that original data set, and then you randomize it, and then you create a randomized data set, and then you reconstruct the original distribution from this randomized data set. So we'll come to all of this. We'll just read through it. So data providers randomize the data and transmit the randomized data to the data receiver. The data receiver estimates the original distribution of the data by employing a distribution reconstruction algorithm. So if x is the value of a sensitive attribute, then x plus ei will appear in the database. The ei is a random noise drawn from some distribution. So essentially what they do is it's almost like a secret key, let's say. So what the original dataset person does is he has this noise called ei. This ei, somehow the people who are using the dataset will also know EI is the noise. So essentially, think of it like a value that's being added to all the columns in the dataset, so that it does not represent uh, the original parameters of the dataset. Let's say now, when the dataset goes to the person who wants to consume it, who's going to keep it private, then he can remove this noise and get back the original distribution. Although he can't get back the exact values of the original data set, he'll be somewhere close to it. So this randomization method um, has a problem in the sense that it may destroy the integrity of the data set. So this is a problem with this method, this randomization. So now coming to one of the most practical methods is what I call it. So this is anonymization. Right? So anonymization is basically you look at the data and then you do two things. You suppress some data and then you generalize some data. So if you look at this example given here, some of the data is suppressed, some of the data is generalized. Right. So if you look at what is suppressed here, what is suppressed here is the name. The name has completely been suppressed. It has been removed. Okay. But then when you look at the birth column, you've removed the specifics of the birth. So it has become slightly more generalized. So that's basically what it is. But although when they say K anonymity, they mean that a set of K data fields can identify K data points. Anyway, we don't have to go to that detail. So essentially, what they mean is now this data point and this data point, right, which originally looked at, I mean, which originally identified Alice and Bob, is also identifying Alice and Bob. So basically, the K here is 2. Right. So what is different here? The disease is different here. Other than that, nothing has changed, and the K here is 2. So this is two anonymity model. So it's something to do like that. But essentially, the difference between anonymization and randomization is the fact that you are changing the data itself without affecting the usability of the data set or the data. So generalization or suppression. So I think we can skip over all these, and then risk and utility. Right. We have regulatory framework, and I think GDPR is something that is going to be spoken about in this set of questions. Okay. So now let's. Just a moment. So GDPR is called the, so we spoke about this in the last lecture actually. So General Data Protection Regulation. Right, and this is basically for the European Union. And this deals with information privacy for all of the European Union's member states. So these member states are nothing but countries like Germany, Belgium, all of those European Union countries. UK is not one of it, by the way. So GDPR makes provisions for the individual member states, which means the individual countries, to add their own exemptions. So they're saying the European Union is basically something that concerns all these countries inside. This is the European Union. So can all of these countries inside of it, can they modify this GDPR and add their own laws or remove certain aspects of GDPR, which is where I talk about exemptions. Exemptions means like uh, ignoring some of these laws. Right? So does GDPR allow it? The answer is yes, correct, but it's not exact. It's not like you can completely remove everything. So what GDPR does is GDPR, it allows the European Union member states to make specific exemptions in some areas of the law, not in all the areas. So the condition is These exemptions should not conflict with the core principles of GDPR, right? And this flexibility is basically given to accommodate different legal frameworks in each country, right? So this is pretty much what it is. So it's not like it's set in stone, but it's not like you can completely change everything also. 3DPR introduces a new data protection principle that requires organizations to so GDPR also introduces something called the data protection principle. So why or what is the point of this introduction? So this comes under the principle of accountability. So this basically means that organizations must show that they comply with the regulation
Is it
through.
A? Answer is A.
Yes, you're right. The answer is A. Yeah, perfect. With regulations through measures like audits, data protection, policies, and training. Okay. So this is the principle of accountability. So now, with this definition in mind, the answer is A. Now, why is B, C, and D wrong? Right. So when it says optional compliance with the privacy regulations, so this goes against the nature of GDPR, which speaks about strict compliance. GDPR is basically for strict compliance. It's not for this thing. So see, you should not confuse the strict compliance with the member states being able to add their own exemptions. That is different. So so the exemptions they talk about changing some of these laws and making it either less severe or more severe. But compliance of these laws is 100% must. Whatever is written in that law in that particular country should be complied with. Okay? And C says that flexibility to report data protection breaches. So again, there is no flexibility here. Data protection breaches must be done mandatorily. And accept data breaches. I mean, this is absolutely wrong. So it's essentially you can kind of eliminate this, and this, and the answer remains on the top, even if you do not know what GDPR is, or to a huge extent. So, in which state of these circumstances could a data subject exercise their right to be forgotten? The right to be forgotten is when they say that remove everything associated with my personal data. right? So in which of these circumstances could a data subject exercise their right to be forgotten? Is it when they have withdrawn consent for data processing and where the data is no longer necessary for the purpose for which it was collected, where erasure is necessary to comply with a legal obligation? All of these are true, all of these are false. So the answer is all of these are true. So when we talk about the first point, it can be summarized as withdrawal of consent. The second point is data is no longer needed. That is their data. And the third is legal obligations requiring erasure. Right? So all of these are true, all of these are false.
Sir, why it is mentioned as forgotten? What do you mean by forgotten? In
The
question.
right to be so the right to be forgotten means I know my data is there in a particular data set or in the hands of a particular company. So under what circumstances can I actually go and exercise my right to remove all of my data from that data set? So that is what it is. It's called the right to be forgotten. Ideally, it should be there. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are, but the circumstances mentioned here are grounds on which I can go and put a lawsuit, or I can basically say remove my data, and they will. That's what forgotten here means. Okay, and this is under the this is under GDPR, by the way, just to clear the context. So a group of companies, right, or organizations. So they may appoint someone called a data protection officer. So he's responsible for making sure the data is being used in a fair way and in compliance with GDPR to represent them all. So can one person handle multiple companies in data? Is the question according to GDPR. So the answer is true. This is just knowledge based questions. So basically, this is the official statement from GDPR. So GDPR allows multiple entities to appoint a single data protection officer, DPO. If they operate within the same group or public authority, provided the DPO is accessible to all the entities involved. So essentially, GDPR provision allows shared DPOs under some conditions. Okay, so that's what this is. So Dash is a system for publicly sharing information about a dataset by describing the patterns of groups within the dataset while withholding information about individuals in the dataset. So you have seen some methods, right? Like suppression and then anonymity. These are all techniques with which we can ensure that some information, I mean, the privacy of individuals are not compromised. So the the general name for these methods is differential privacy. So what this differential privacy does is it ensures that statistical patterns can be derived from datasets without releasing information about specific individuals. Right? So that is the name, differential privacy. You can just keep that in mind. So it's basically you can use the dataset for your purposes. Why do we use datasets? It is to look at some statistical patterns, like on particular Thursday or Friday, someone comes and buys a lot of cool drinks, let's say, or I mean shops, right? So they should know, or let's say Walmart, they should know who comes and buys, on which days some of the goods go better. Does the placement of the good affect the extent to which it is being sold? So these are all statistics. So to do all this, you don't need the name of the person who bought it, right? So that's pretty much what we talk about when you suppose if you're taking Walmart data, then they'll probably clean it and then they'll give it to you, keeping all these aspects in mind. So that's differential privacy. The statistics is going to be there. This is what is required. Now, just for knowledge, so privacy calculus and privacy theory, right? So these two are different frameworks in privacy studies, but they do not describe this particular scenario. So they are actual terms. And privacy paradox, it is a behavioral observation about how the organizations uh, protect their data. So that's privacy paradox. The answer is A for the So this is an interesting question that speaks about the k-anonymity property that we just saw. So when the data is released, the data has some properties associated with it. So the data is said to have this k-anonymity property if the information for each person contained in the release cannot be distinguished from at least how many individuals. So we might go with k is the answer. But actually, as per the definition of k anonymity, the answer is k minus 1. So it says at least k minus 1. So which means it could be k, it could be k plus 1, it could be k plus 2, it could be k plus 3. But it cannot go below k minus 1. So at least there should be k minus 1 uh, entities or rows in that data set which cannot be distinguished. Yeah. So the economics of privacy concerns. So this is basically the economics of privacy. Okay. It concerns the trade-offs associated with the balancing of dash spheres between individuals, organizations, and governments. So the answer to this is A. And so this comes from the definition of economics of privacy. So the definition here is privacy economics is about the interplay between public and private sectors and spheres in the context of personal data. In the context of personal data. So, essentially, if you look at this, internal and external, they are not really official definitions that are used to talk about economics of privacy. Low and high doesn't make sense here, and and this individual and group, they are uh, kind of unrelated to the broad societal privacy trade-offs that we're talking about in this economics of privacy. This one is pretty easy. The goal of privacy preserving data mining is to develop data mining methods without increasing risk of misuse of the what? Of the privacy, of the data, of the anonymity, or of the database. Right? So
It's
you can A
answer is data.
answer is
Data. Answer is data, sir.
yeah, answer is data. You're right. Perfectly right. So it is data. It is pretty straightforward because it doesn't make sense. But you can make a case for database, but data is more appropriate. So you have to go with data. So it's kind of like you have to play a game of eliminating the answers to some extent and then make an educated guess if in case you don't know the exact answer. So dash is a dichotomy. Dichotomy is di means two. So it is an interplay of two aspects, which is basically the person's intention to protect their online privacy versus how they actually behave online. And as a result, which compromises their privacy. It's a dichotomy or an interplay between two of these aspects. So previously in one of the questions, we heard this term privacy paradox and it was spoken about in the class also. So the answer is it is the privacy paradox. And you can actually look at it like this. Privacy calculus, we did not speak about that in class, and it's not associated with this is associated with privacy economics. And differential calculus, this is a mathematical term, right? So this makes sense. Routing table, it absolutely is not the answer. So the answer is A. And so the paradox, the privacy paradox, what does it mean? It basically it refers to the inconsistency between people's privacy concerns and their actual behavior. So there is they may not want to protect their data despite claiming to value privacy in the sense that see if you want pure privacy then you'll have to shut yourself off across all social media across everything and then stay in a remote warehouse, which is not possible. So in a way if you want to be a part of the current world you need to compromise on some of your privacy aspects even though someone says I am completely concerned about my privacy, data privacy. In one or the other ways, he is consenting to his personal records being used. For example, if you sign up to Google's email, you have terms and conditions which say they can use your data for so and so and so. So it's like you cannot escape it. That is a privacy paradox. So I want to make sure that my data does not go out, nobody uses it, but in the same way, my behavior, right, just to sign up for Google Gmail or anything else, which basically asks my consent to use my data in a lot of ways, so that which kind of impinges on my privacy. This is the paradox. Paradox is nothing but it's a gray area. It's like okay, it, it is sometimes we say yes, sometimes we say no to this, right? So that's what this is. So the answer is privacy paradox. Yeah, this is a repeat question. So what paradox? So which paradox describes the differences between people's intentions to disclose personal information and their actual behavior? So I think we just spoke about it. The answer is, see, I'm not even going to write down the options to this. The answer is privacy paradox. So anonymity is the ability to protect data integrity, or is it to conceal a person's identity? Is it to share confidential information, or is it to control access to data? Definitely, this is not the answer. Um,
It is answer B, sir.
yes, you're right.
Conceal
Answer is
a person's identity.
exactly. You're right. This is straightforward, right? So another direct question. So in the context of privacy preserving data mining, right? So we saw a slide on this. What is a method to use? What is a method used to obscure sensitive data with random noise? So we spoke about this random noise.
Randomization. It is randomization, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you're right. Yep. And yeah, I think that pretty much ends today's session. I'll be around for a few minutes. If you don't have any questions, you're free to leave. Right? Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Sir, can you explain once again that graph anonymity and
Oh yeah, sure. Right. So think of this graph. So this is not a very intuitive graph. So that's why you have to think of it this way. So there is data, right? So the whole thing here that we're talking about is data sets or data. So the data sets and data, they're nothing but um, rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of data. Right? So let us say that let's talk about this in the context of this data being a part of an organization. Correct. Now let us look at this in the context of the organization wanting to process this data. Okay. So the organization can process this data by itself, or it can send it to somebody else also to process it. Mostly, as we've seen in the previous classes, the data is sent to someone else to process it. Now, with this context in mind, let us analyze this graph. So you have the fourth quadrant, which is nothing but transparency. Okay? So transparency happens when you disclose large amounts of personal information, and it tends to accurate it tends to reveal an accurate representation of almost a person's self. So let's talk about the the number plate data of all the vehicles. If you go to Parivahan or somewhere, and if you type in someone's license plate, I think you'll get some information of what the vehicle is and what make and what model it is. Right. So that is transparency. In the sense you are disclosing everything almost. So essentially, transparency tends to happen in certain cases. It tends to happen when an organization sends data to another organization for it to be processed. At that point, if you say no, I'll only give 10% of what I have in terms of the accuracy of data, then it's pretty much not going to help them process the data properly. And also, transparency has another meaning here, so it's slightly a tough thing to look at it in this context. So transparency means you basically let someone know that this is what you're doing. That's pretty much what it is. So, but in this case, transparency means transparency is concerned with the way data is processed or the way data is put out to the public, and that's what it is. So, anonymity. Now, if we move from transparency to anonymity here, it says that the accuracy of personal information is less. So, even though in this case you are putting the data out, you are giving the data, you are adding some noise to the personal data or removing the personal data, in the sense removing those aspects of those data which can tie it to a particular person. So sharing of personal information while concealing a consumer's real identity. So that's what anonymity is. So in this case, accuracy of the personal information goes down. That's what this first quadrant is. Now from here, if you come down, this is completely secret, where you are obfuscating the data, you're completely modifying the data, and at the same time, you are you're personally identifiable PII. They call it PII, personally identifiable information. Um, that is also not being shared. So the data is basically with the same company only. They are processing it by themselves. Let's say that is a so that is a that is like internal sharing, right? That you're technically sharing, you're giving it to someone to process it, although being inside the company. So it is sharing of as less information as possible in order to get the desired outcome, is to process the data and get inference. And if you go towards the right here, there is confidentiality, which basically means that you are not going to externalize the data, you're not going to give it to anybody else, but at the same time, you're not going to modify much of the personal data. So in the sense, it's like you have the actual data set, but you're making sure it's confidential. Nobody else can see it other than me. So that's pretty much what it is. So it's like four quadrants, which looks at data sharing, as which basically talks about data sharing. Yeah, that's it. I think that's what my interpretation of this is. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Then I think I can end the call if I think everybody's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.